Hello, just Lay. Hi. Uh, Good evening to all. First of all, a very warm Tashlek to all the participants who are currently present in webinar and joining us from Facebook and YouTube Live from different parts of the world. To begin with, may I first request everyone to kindly put your videos on and microphone on mute during the whole session. Thank you. First, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Tenzin Legman, Assistant Program Coordinator of Tibet House, New Delhi. And I welcome you all to our third session of today's virtual program, which is Introduction to Buddhism. And it consists of 24 different topics taught by different speakers with profound knowledge of Nalanda Buddhist Studies. And today, we are very glad and honored to have among us Dr. Pooja Dabralla, who will be speaking on Summary of Buddhist Psychology. To tell a bit about today's speaker, Dr. Pooja Dabralla is an assistant professor, Department of Buddhist and Tibetan Studies at Namgyal Institute of Tibetology, Gangtok, Sikkim. Her doctoral research topic is Nagarjuna's philosophy of emptiness and J. Tsongkhapa's exposition, seen in two prolific periods. She has teaching and research experience with a wide range of institutions, including the University of Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Tibet House, and YMCA. She has numerous publications and also presented papers on the themes such as the practice of emptiness, a Buddhist approach to inner and world peace, Buddhist psychology, form and substance in Buddhist philosophy, and so forth at national and international conferences and seminars. She is proficient in Latin and German and has taught the latter for many years at the University of Delhi and other institutes. Okay, so before we proceed with today's program, let us first recite a short prayer together. Sangye Chuda, Sangye Sognam La, Chancho Pato, Tawne Japso, Sangye Chuso Jibe, Sognam Ke, Dola Penje, Sangye Dowa Sho, Sangye Chuda, Soge, Sognam La, Chancho Pato, Tangye Chuso Jibe, Sognam Ke, Dola Penje, Sangye Dowa Sho, Sangye Chuda, Soge, Sognam La, Chancho Pato, Tawne Japso, Tangye Chuso Jibe, Sognam Ke, Dola Penje, Sangye Dowa Sho. Thank you. And now I would like to request Dr. Pujala to kindly proceed the session.
Thank you, Tenzil Lengmola. Can you hear me? Okay. So, hello everyone, Tashi Dele. And thank you for the introductory prayer and also for my introduction. So, before I begin, let me thank Venerable Geshe-la and Tibet House for this opportunity to share the summary of Buddhist psychology with all of you here. So I welcome you all for this third session on the summary of Buddhist psychology. And I can see many familiar faces from NDC, NMC, and all my friends are here almost. And is there anyone who has not attended any of the NDC who is not part of NDC, NMC courses? Anybody? So I know. Is there? Please raise your hand if you have not attended or if you're not part of any of the courses like NDC, NMC. Okay, I think most of you are from NDC and NMC, so it's going to be okay. There are few friends from Tibetan courses also. I can see Pimpala, others also. Okay, and okay, some from retreats also, right? Chanchukla is here. Firstly, Chanchukla. Okay, okay. So now, so let's see how it goes. Some of you have already attended, courses on Buddhist psychology, and some I can see there are new faces. So okay, let me okay, let's see how it goes. Okay, so okay, is there anybody who has not attended the first two sessions? Is there anybody who has not? Okay, Shelley. Okay. And okay, so if don't worry, anyway, Shelley is from NDC, so she has a good knowledge of Buddhist psychology, so she should not worry. Okay, if there is someone who has not attended any of the first two sessions, of course, if you have attended, that's going to be today's session is going to be easier. But if you have not attended, don't worry. I'll just try to give you a summary of that, so and then try to connect with what we are going to learn today. Okay. So if you remember from the first session, it was on the Four Noble Truth taught by Venerable Keshila, and in the first session. So we learned from the Four Noble Truth connecting with the purpose of life. And then we learned that, okay, finally the meaning of life or the purpose of life is twofold, what we call it, okay, not wanting any suffering and wanting happiness. And then, if we given the option or if we given the choice that what percentage of happiness do we want and what percentage of suffering we would like to shun, then we all will agree that if we given the choice, then I would like to have 100% happiness and 0 miseries. Okay, I can see now some of my students also from NIT, so that makes me happy that they are not bored of my lectures. Okay, good. So whatever is the case, so I have, something to share. Okay, they have not studied Buddhist psychology yet. So, okay, so then I'll try to make it more introductory. Okay, so now, so I was just sharing that during the first session from Venerable Keshila, we learned that, okay, how, finally, whatever teachings given by Buddha Shakyamuni, we should be able to connect it with the two purpose or two aspirations, which is to have happiness and not have suffering. And if we are given choice that, okay, what degree of happiness we want, then we will all agree that we want 100% happiness and no miseries. So these are the two basic aspiration. And when it comes to these two basic aspiration, there is no difference, or it doesn't matter, which gender you are or which caste you have or which creed you belong to or which ethnicity you belong to, which religion you embrace. It doesn't matter. When it comes to these two basic aspiration, we are all same, that we do not want suffering and we want happiness. So now the question is that, okay, so first thing is that we learn that, okay, first thing is to gain conviction in this fact that, okay, whatever I do, whatever actions I perform during my day or during my life, the underlying aspirations is twofold, that I do not want any kind of discomfort or any kind of suffering, and I want happiness. And then if possible, I want maximum happiness and 0 suffering. So first thing is to gain conviction that, okay, and for this we have to do a little bit of reflective exercise. What is that? That whatever we do in a day, just keep asking questions that why am I doing this? Let's say if I go to college, if I do something, I teach, or I have other jobs to attend, or even if I help others, if we keep asking deeper questions that, okay, why am I performing this particular actions, we'll come to the point that, okay, finally the underlying aspiration is to not to have any suffering and have happiness. And by doing this act, I get happiness. By doing this act, my sufferings go away. So when we gain this conviction, then the teachings will be able to connect with what we learned of the Four Noble Truths, and then we learned the Buddha nature, and what we are going to learn today of Buddhist psychology will make sense to us. Okay, so this was about the first session. And then the next thing is, okay, now if I ask you that, okay, for example, if I ask all of us here who have not attended any of the teachings, before, if I ask that, okay, how many of you want to attain nirvana, and how many of you want to attain full awakening or Buddhahood or omniscience, then we might feel hesitant. I'm talking about those people who have not attended any of these teachings before. Why? Because when we think about these two things, okay, nirvana and Buddhahood, we think, okay, they are the spiritual goals, and really something, nothing to do with me. So I'm just looking for a simple, happiness. I'm looking for a state where I do not have any discomfort. But if we really come to know, if we really explore and study, then we'll come to know that, okay, these two basic aspirations, what we call the state where you have no suffering, in technical terms, we call it nirvana. Means a state where you can actualize a state where you have no suffering and complete fearlessness, in technical term, that is known as nirvana. Whereas the state where you have maximum happiness and perfect ease, where your mind flows, where your mind feels no obstruction, that state we technically call it full awakening or Buddhahood or omniscience. So if we come to know, if we explore and come to know that, okay, so underlying aspiration of each of my action, each and every action that I do, is maximum happiness and zero suffering. And in technical terms, zero suffering is known as nirvana or liberation, and the maximum happiness is known as full awakening or Buddhahood. Then we will not feel hesitant to say that, okay, yes, I'm looking for fearlessness, which means nirvana, and I'm looking for maximum happiness or maximum ease, which is technically known as Buddhahood or full awakening. So then, what Buddha taught, that, okay, you can attain nirvana, you can attain Buddhahood, they will not seem so, distant, or they will not seem not so disconnected from our aspiration. In fact, these are related to the two aspirations that we all share. Okay, now this is the one part that we learned from the first session. Now the next question is, okay, if we all have the same aspiration, then the next question arises, do we have the potential to actualize or to fulfill those aspirations? Do I have the potential to attain a state where I have complete fearlessness? Do I have a potential to attain a state where I have maximum happiness? So this connects us to the subject matter of the second session, which was about Buddha nature, and where we learned, where Mr. Dipesh Thakurji, he went into a great detail of the division of the nature of the definition of this Buddha nature, then the divisions of this Buddha nature, and also how we can gain conviction in this Buddha nature. So Buddha nature, in Sanskrit, it is known as Tathagata Garbha, and in English we call it, let's say, the treasure of perfection, or the potential for perfection, the potential to actualize, the potential to fulfill the two aspirations. So we all, and then again, when it comes to this Buddha nature, there is no difference between the enlightened ones or the fully awakened ones and yourself. So this we learned from the second session, where we learned, okay, that the Buddha nature is the potential that we all have, and finally, this is the hope for all of us to fulfill our aspirations, which are twofold. Okay, so this was about the second session. And then this also reminds me of a very beautiful analogy that, okay, if we have this potential, then still we are in samsara, or still we are suffering, right? So this reminds me of a very beautiful analogy given by Arya Maitreya, where he said that just as a beggar, just as in relation to the Buddha nature or the treasure of perfection, he gave this analogy where it says that just as a beggar, he or she remains beggar if he or she doesn't discover that there is a huge treasure underneath the floor of his or her hut. Let's say if there is a beggar who lives in a very simple hut, and underneath the hut of this beggar there is a huge treasure, but as long as the beggar does not discover this treasure, the beggar remains beggar. But the moment beggar discovers that, okay, there is a huge treasure, then the beggar is no more beggar. Instead, he can be the richest person on this earth. So we see that, okay, finally we have to, so after knowing that we have this potential, the task that we have to have is gaining conviction in this potential again. So for this, again, there are number of reasonings that we learned, and also the examples were given by Mr. Dipesh Thakurji in the last session that we have. And also we can read more, and we can resort to more reasonings, and also to the empirical or the experience of our own mind and the mental states, that, okay, if we have this potential, whether or not we have this potential where we can attain the state of perfection in terms of having no suffering and having maximum happiness. So this was all about the second session, or the Buddha nature, in Sanskrit known as Tathagata Garbha. Okay, so then now the next question arises. Okay, first we learned that, okay, whatever I do, the basic aspiration is to not to have any suffering and have happiness. Number one. Number two, we learned that, okay, then the question came to us that, okay, it's fine that I have this aspiration, but do I have the potential to fulfill those aspirations? Then we learned that yes, the answer is yes, because there is something called Buddha nature. There is Buddha nature, so there is a hope that I can fulfill these two aspirations. Now the third question is that, okay, if I have the potential to fulfill those aspirations or to attain the state of perfection, then why am I suffering? Why do I go through discomforts? Why do I have pains? Why do I have anxiety? So this again, from the second session, if I remember correctly, Mr. Dipesh Thakurji, he briefly touched upon that although while we all have this potential for perfection, this potential is obscured due to mental defilements. Our mind, which has the potential to attain the state of fearlessness and attain the state of infinite happiness or the maximum happiness, why we do not experience those two things? Because this mind or the potential is obscured by the mental defilements, and therefore we have to go into the study of something called mental defilements. And I'm sure that in the coming sessions we are going to go into the details of the mental defilements that obscure this potential that we have for perfection. So this, and again, we learned briefly that, okay, these mental defilements, if you have attended the sessions, I remember that he briefly mentioned that how these mental defilements, they are broadly can be classified into two main categories. One known as afflictive obscurations, and the other one is known as cognitive obscurations. So the afflictive obscurations, okay, if I put it very simply, let's say afflictive obscurations are constituted of the afflictions or the destructive emotions. Number one, such as anger, jealousy, hatred, attachment, covetousness, ignorance, and so forth. And then the second part of this afflictive obscuration is known as contaminated actions. The actions or the negative actions of the body, speech, and mind. And the third part of this afflictive obscuration is known as the active imprints or active seeds of these two, afflictions and contaminated actions. So these three things, afflictions, which are the destructive emotions, number one, then the contaminated actions of the body, speech, and mind. In other words, the negative actions of the body, speech, and mind, number two. And number three is the inactive seeds of these afflictions and contaminated actions. So these three things are included in the category known as afflictive obscurations. So this is something which obscures our Buddha nature, or which obscures our potential, our mind. It taints our mind and makes us not to have perfection. Number one. Then besides the afflictive obscuration, we also have something called cognitive obscurations. And to put it very simply, what is cognitive obscurations? So we can say that the subtle inactive seeds of the afflictive obscurations are known as cognitive obscurations. So they again obstruct us. So the primary job of the cognitive obscuration is to obstruct us from not attaining the maximum happiness. Okay, let me put it once again. It can be a little technical, but I'll tell you why these two broad categories are there. Let's say afflictive obscurations, which we just learned, is threefold. Then these afflictive obscuration, what is the primary job is of these afflictive obscuration is to obstruct us, is to prevent us from attaining the state of cessation of miseries, or a state of freedom from miseries, a state where there is no miseries. Number one. And then the cognitive obscuration, they primarily they stop us from attaining the maximum happiness, which in technical terms we call it omniscience. And the job of afflictive obscuration is to prevent us or obstruct us from attaining the state of zero miseries or state of complete fearlessness. In technical terms, we call it nirvana or liberation. Okay, so these are the twofold mental defilements. And then, of course, we have to learn in detail what are the cognitive obscurations, what are the afflictive obscurations, and how they prevent us from attaining the state of fearlessness or zero miseries, and how cognitive obscuration, they stop us from attaining the omniscience or full awakening. In other words, maximum ease or maximum happiness. So this we are going to learn in the later sessions, in the coming sessions. Now, so what we learned is, okay, first we learned that, okay, there are two basic aspirations, this aspiration of no miseries and aspiration of maximum happiness. Number two, we learned that we don't only have these two aspirations, we also have the potential to fulfill these two aspirations, and this potential is known as Buddha nature or Tathagata Garbha. Then thirdly, we learned that, okay, if we have this potential, then what is that thing which is obstructing us for this potential to be unraveled or for this potential to be unfolded? We learned that this potential is obscured due to mental defilements, which are broadly classified under afflictive obscurations and cognitive obscurations. Now, this will connect us to the subject matter of today's session, which is on Buddhist psychology. So these steps are very important, but because if we have these steps in our mind, then what we learned in today's session and also in the coming sessions, we can relate with it. We can relate with it empirically, and also we can relate with the purpose of our attending this course, purpose of our joining other sessions. So then it becomes very, very empirical for us. And the beauty of the Buddhist psychology is that it is extremely empirical in nature. If we can, and then at the top of it, if we can connect it with the aspiration, our own aspiration, then of course, you know, those who are just learning it for the sake of knowledge, that also fine. But if we can relate it, or if we can connect it with the aspirations or the our basic aspiration, then you can easily connect all the examples and the reasonings given here with the empirical realities. Okay, so that is the benefit. Okay, now the third. So today we are going to do the summary of Buddhist psychology. So now after the third point, we learned that, okay, finally, this Buddha nature is the potential that we have for the perfection. And this potential is obscured by the mental defilement. This much we have learned till now. Now this Buddha nature is all about mind, right? It's all about the potential of mind. It has nothing to do with the external objects, but it has the potential of our own mind. So the mind becomes very important. And then this mind, because it's a subject, it interacts with the objects. it should have objects, right? When we say mind, it means the subject. So it should interact with the object. So, and then mind interacting with the object. Now we have to learn how whatever, when we say the experiences that we go through, be it the experiences of pleasure, which we like, and the experiences of pain, anxieties that we do not like, they all ensue due to the interaction between two factors or two things known as subject, like mind, and its object. So therefore, the study of the mind becomes extremely relevant here. Okay, now, and then how can I gain conviction? Okay, when I said that, okay, whatever we experience, in our life, it is the result of the interaction between two things. Number one, the mind as the subject, and the objects that we interact with, or objects that this mind interacts with. Number two, so this mind and the objects and the interaction between these two, they tell us that, okay, whether I'm going to experience happiness, which I like, or I'm going to experience pain, which I do not like. Okay, how can I gain conviction in this part? So this is extremely important, that, okay, finally, it is the interaction between these two things that all my experiences come into being. Because only when we gain conviction in this part, we will do something to make this mind refined, and we will do something to get a very refined object as well. Okay, so now let me give you a few examples to have conviction in this part. Let's say mind and its object, and then there are different scenarios. Let's say first, let me give you one example where the same mind interacting with the different objects and the different experiences, or this same subject or the mind reacts differently, and the different experiences they come into being. Let me give you one example. Now, okay, let's say your same mind or yourself, your mind comes in contact with a person who has been always so kind to you, who has been extremely kind to you, has been always so helpful to you, so a very dear friend of yours, number one. Number two, your same mind comes in contact with a person who has always been so nasty to you and always been very difficult for you. Okay, so these are the two scenarios. The same mind interacting comes in contact with the person who has been extremely kind to you, and the same mind, your same mind interacting or coming in contact with the person who has been nasty to you. Okay, anybody who would like to tell me in which case do you think you will experience happiness, or your mind will react in a positive way? What do you think? Anybody? Just unmute yourself and tell me. Yes, David G.
I meet a nice person, I will feel attracted and happy.
Okay, very good. And how many of you agree with David G? Okay, so we all agree that, okay, when my mind, the same mind, when it interacts with the kind person or a kind friend, then the experience of happiness comes into being. Whereas the same mind, the mind-wise it's same, the same mind, your own mind comes in contact with the person who has been extremely nasty to you or who has been always very difficult to you, then the anxieties, some kind of discomfort, the feeling of running away, and the feeling of pushing the person away, they come into being, right? So now we see that this same mind, when it interacts with two different objects, the two different experiences, mental experiences, they come into being. Now, this is one thing. Now, not only the different objects determine our experiences, but also your own mind under two different situations, and the object remains same. This also determines what kind of experience that we are going to have. Let me give you another example. Let's say now the example that I'm going to give you, where your mind is under two different situations and the object remains same. Okay, let's say, how many of you agree with me that we all have something called favorite food, right? Okay, we all can point to something saying that, okay, this is my favorite, right? Now, let's say, and some people will say that, okay, strawberry cake is my favorite and momos are my favorite. So whatever is your favorite, let's say your favorite. Now you get to eat this favorite food when It's your birthday. Birthday meaning everybody is wishing you, everybody is saying so nice words to you, and you are very happy. So you get to eat your favorite food on the day of your birthday. And this is one scenario. Now the second scenario is where you get to eat your favorite food on the day when you have heard a very bad news about about your near and dear one going through difficult time or difficulty or through pains. So now tell me, anybody who can unmute and just share in which scenario. The first scenario is that you get to eat your favorite food when you were so happy because it's your birthday and everybody is so nice to you. Number one. Number two, you get to eat the same favorite food, whatever it is, on the day when you have heard a very bad news about a dear one who is going through a difficult time. Okay, tell me, it's the same food, but the mind is under two different situations, right? Now tell me, anybody who can share that, okay, in which case do you think your mind will enjoy your, what you call is favorite food? Anybody? Just unmute and share. Anybody?
Yeah, I guess you would find that the happy occasion, the birthday, would be just ideal for enjoying the food. Whereas there may be on a very sad or miserable day, you may find some comfort in the food. I don't know. But yeah, it would be a struggle.
That's perfect. That's the perfect answer. That yes, you might find some comfort on the day when you eat your favorite food, even if you're sad, but you will not be able to enjoy it. So when we compare the two scenarios, when you get to eat it on the day of on your birthday, when you're very happy, you enjoy the same. So food wise, it's same. Yes, how many of you agree with me that the food wise it remains same, but your mind being under two different situations, it reacts differently. So now from this, we have to know that not only the object being different changes the interaction, even the subject being under two different situations where the object remains same, the interaction may be, the interaction can be very different in terms of giving you happiness or pain, right? So now from this, what we have to learn is the interaction between the subject and object is something extremely important. Finally, this interaction between your subject like mind and the objects out there, this determines whether we are going to experience happiness or we are going to experience some kind of pain. Okay, so now if this interaction is so important, an interaction between what? Between two things, subject like mind and the objects. So now to study the subject so well becomes extremely important, and to study the object so well becomes extremely important. And then to study the subject in terms of, okay, and why do I have to study the subject? Because I have learned that finally, whether I experience happiness or I experience pain, that totally depends on the interaction between subject and object. Now, if I want this interaction to give me maximum of happiness, this interaction to give me no suffering, then the interaction should be between the most refined object and the most refined subject. So the subject should be most refined in terms of being extremely subtle, and the object should be most refined in terms of being the subtlest. So this we have to gain conviction that finally the interaction between these two factors determines my experiences. And if I want the experience of maximum happiness, this interaction should happen in such a way that it gives rise to maximum happiness. And for that, and since the interaction depends on the two factors, subject and object, if the subject is most refined and the object is also most refined, then the interaction is going to be the most refined interaction, giving me the maximum happiness and the zero miseries, which are known as my aspirations. Okay, so therefore the study of the subject. So how to make this subject most refined, and then how to make this object most refined. This becomes extremely important. So now the ways and means or the study of making this object most refined in terms of knowing the true nature of the object, number one, then knowing the different levels of the realities of the object, then knowing the ways and means and rationalities to make this object most refined. This all is included under the study of ontology or the study of philosophy. So the study of philosophy or ontology is all about making this object most refined. How? Through knowing the nature of the object, through knowing the true nature of the object, through knowing the different levels of realities of the object, and then the ways and means and rationalities to make this, to know the subtlest of the reality of the object. So this all falls under the category known as study of the philosophy or the ontology. Number one. Then likewise, this subject should be made most refined or subtlest. For this, we have to go into the study of the nature of the mind. We have to go into the study of the divisions of mind, classifications of mind, and also the ways and means and techniques to make this mind more subtle. So this all falls under the category of the study of the subject known as psychology. So psychology is the science of the study of mind. So this study, so now when we study psychology, okay, we have a very clear purpose in our mind that, okay, finally, if I want to fulfill my two basic aspirations, for which I have the potential in the form of Buddha nature, I should study psychology, which tells me how to make my subject or mind most refined. And I should also give some time to the study of the philosophy or ontological reality, which helps me to know the subtlest, to have the subtlest of the object. Okay, so this is now in the coming lectures, in the coming sessions, we are going to study, of course, we are going to go deeper into the philosophy, where we are going to learn how to make this object most refined and how to know the subtlest of the reality of the object. So this we are going to study in the coming sessions. And then this session and the next session, which is on the sevenfold division of mind, we are going to study, or we are going to have an overview. Of course, in 2 lectures, it's not possible to study it completely, but we would like to have an overview. We will try to have an overview of the psychology or the mind, the nature of the mind, its division, its types, and the ways and means. Okay, so with this, now we come to the topic, which is the summary of this Buddhist psychology. So as I said, that finally that, when we say the Buddha nature, it's all about our mind, right? And the mind, the study of the mind becomes extremely important. So this connects us to the Buddhist psychology. Now, let me share a PowerPoint presentation here. Sorry, it's taking a little time. Can you see something on the screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
Ujala, do you want me to share it?
Just give me a few seconds. Can you see now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All of you can see the slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Buddhist
that's-
psychology, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so this is okay, before I go into the details of psychology and the nature of mind, let me just read this for you. This comes from Dhammapad, which is the collection of the Buddha Sutra in verse form. And in this Buddha said that, he set the tone for the purpose of studying the mind. So Buddha said, mind is the chief and precedes them all. If with impure mind one acts or speaks, miseries follow, like a cart following the ox. So as the verse read, so what is being indicated here, that mind finally, whether we are going to experience happiness or we are going to experience some kind of a pain, that depends on depends on your mind interacting with its object. So if your mind has the impure mind, and with this impure mind, in a way, okay, what do you mean by impure mind here? The negative states of mind. Negative states of mind such as afflictions that we learned, anger, jealousy, hatred, ill will, and finally, the ignorance. Okay, so if we act through these minds, negative minds, then what happens? Miseries follow. How? Like a cart follows the ox. Then, luckily, fortunately, Buddha did not stop there. He said, mind is chief and perceives them all. If with pure mind one acts or speaks, happiness follows, like a shadow that never leaves. So the earlier verse was about how the sufferings they come into being by dependence on the impure states of mind, and these impure states of mind lead to the contaminated actions. Now, just as the suffering they come into being by dependence on the negative states of mind, the happiness that we all seek, this also comes into being by dependence on the positive states of mind or the pure states of mind. And then, for example, what? For example, compassion, loving kindness, stability, clarity, wisdom. All these will make sure that what we say or what we speak or what we perform in terms of the actions of the three doors, body, speech, and mind, they are positive actions, and therefore the happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves. So this comes from the Dhammapada, where Buddha said, why should one study mind? So now from this also we can see that the mind is of the greatest import in terms of our experience of happiness and pain. Okay, now this we just learned the interaction between the subject and the object, how depending on the different scenarios, the different kinds of experiences come into being, and depending on the different scenarios pertaining to the object and also the subject, the mind, our same mind reacts differently. Okay, so this we have just learned. So I'll move to the next slide. Okay, so now it connects us with the mind. So finally, we come to the point that, okay, the studying the nature of mind, studying the mind becomes extremely important. So now what is the mind? So in Buddhist treatises, for example, the treatises of Acharya Vasubandhu, Arya Sangha, Acharya Dharmakirti, Acharya Chandrakirti, and also in sutras, you will see there is the nature of the mind is explained and the definition of the mind is given. Okay, before I go to the first 2 points, so what first 2 points say? That the mind is impermanent phenomena. Okay, I'll just quickly go through these 2 points. So this mind, what we call, is the empirical reality, and then it is impermanent in nature and non-physical in nature. And of course, you must be having a question here that, okay, how can I know that I have, this empirical entity known as mind? And there are many questions around it. For example, how can I know that I have a mind which is not confined to the physical brain, and or it is different from physical brain? For example, one of the attribute given here on the slide is it is non-physical in nature, whereas the brain that we have is physical in nature. So this question is a very important question, that, okay, how can I know that I have a mind which is different from the brain? Okay, so this, it's a very profound discussion and a separate discussion. And if somebody is interested in knowing that, okay, how can I know that, okay, the mind that I have or the mental states that I experience, they are different from the physical brain and are non-physical in nature, then for this, what do you call, the Pramana Vartika, the text by the title Pramana Vartika by Acharya Dharmakirti, the 7th century great Nalanda master, in this text, chapter 2, he went into a great detail, reasonings and examples to establish how there is a mind which is the empirical reality which we all experience, and this is not reduced to the physical brain, but it is different from the brain. He also explained the relationship between the physical brain and this non-physical empirical mind. And he also explains that, okay, how, when the brain dies at the time of death, then what happens to the brain, or what happens to the mind? It went into all he went into the questions like that, whether or not mind disappears when your brain dies. So all this, and then if the mind does not disappear, then what happens to the continuum of mind? So the question of reincarnation and the question of rebirth was also addressed. In fact, rationally, or with the help of so many reasonings, he explains what happens to the mind, or how, number one, how there is a mind which is different from the physical entity known as brain. And not only they are different, he also went into a detail of how they are related, though they are different, how they are mutually related and mutually dependent. Number three, he also went into the detail of what happens to the mind when the physical brain dies. Okay, so these are the separate questions and separate discussions. And if somebody is really interested, there is text known as Pramana Vartika, which we study as a part of Nalanda Master's course. And also, we learned it a little more in detail during the Nalanda Diploma course. Somebody interested can, can be part of those courses. Okay, now what we are, keeping these questions aside, whether or not there is a mind which is different from brain, and whether or not when we die, the brain dies, the mind also dies, or mind also annihilates. So keeping these questions aside, we all will agree that we all have some experience of this empirical entity known as mind. For example, we all have the experience of anger, right? We all have the experience of feeling compassionate towards others. We all have the experience of feeling happy. We all have the experience of feeling sad. So these experiences, these are the empirical realities, and these, these are known as the mental states, mind and mental states. Okay, so now how this mind is defined. This mind, which is impermanent in nature, impermanent meaning something which changes momentarily, right? Yesterday I was angry, today I'm not angry, so it's changing, right? It's changing. So this is an impermanent phenomena, number one. Number two, it is non-physical in nature. Unlike the physical brain, it is not constituted of the physical matter. It is not constituted of electrons, protons, and neutrons. So this is non-physical in nature, number two. Now, the next thing is, what is the definition? How can I define this mind? So, as I told you, in the treatises or in the sutras, and also in treatises like Acharya Vasubandhu, Arya Sangha, and then Acharya Dharmakirti, and also Acharya Chandrakirti, we see the definition of mind as an agent that is clear and knowing. Let me repeat it. An agent that is clear and knowing. So the mind is defined as a clear and knowing agent. So we can see from the definition that the mind has two aspects. What we call this empirical mind, it has two aspects. What? Number one, the aspect of the clarity or luminosity. Number two, the aspect of knowing. Okay, so it's not 3 and 4, it's 1 or 2. 1 and 2. Okay, number one aspect is the aspect of clarity. Number two is the aspect of knowing. Okay, so to explain these two aspects and to have a very good picture of the nature of mind, let me give you one example. Okay, to explain the clarity aspect of the mind, oftentimes the example, the analogy given is of the mirror. So mirror, we all will agree that in order for a reflection to be formed in a mirror, okay, if I can have a little interaction, I have to stop sharing it. Okay, so let's say first is the clarity aspect of the mind, and the oftentimes example given is of the mirror, number one. So this mirror, we know that in order to have the reflection of any object in the mirror, the surface of the mirror should be clear. How many of you agree with me that if I want that the reflection of the flower or reflection of the tree or reflection of anything to be formed on a mirror, the surface of the mirror should be very clean. If the surface of the mirror is not clean or it's dirty, then the reflection cannot be formed, right? So likewise, to have the reflection of the object or the images of the object to be formed on our mind, the surface of the mind should be very clear. Okay, the surface of the mind should be very clear. Okay, for this we can, okay, yes. So just as the mirror, if the mirror is dirty, the reflection of the object cannot be formed on it. Likewise, if the surface of the mind is tinted or is dirty, then the reflections of the object cannot be formed on it. Number one. Okay. So from this, we have to know, just as the mirror has this aspect of clarity, the mind, our mind also has this aspect of clarity. Number one. Now, this clarity aspect also has another connotation, which I have written as luminosity, right? So how to know this luminosity aspect of the mind? Let's say, okay, let's do this exercise. For this, let's do this exercise. How many of you can see this flower in my hand? Right. Okay. Just look at it. Okay. Now, just close your eyes and think about this flower. Just close your eyes. Let's do this exercise. Close your eyes and think about this flower. Okay. Now you can open your eyes. Okay. How many of you could think about the flower that I've shown to you? Okay. And then how did this flower appear to you? As very dark or red in color or very dark? Okay. Okay, tell me, those who say that, okay, I could see the image of the flower, or I could see the flower. After closing my eyes, I could see the flower. Just raise your hand. Those who said that I could see the flower. Okay, very good. So now when the flower came to our mind, the flower appeared to our mind was not so dark, right? So this tells us that this mind has the nature of luminosity. For example, let's say how many of you can see your screen right now? Or let's say how many of you can see your mobile or any object in front of you? Raise your hand. Right? And if it is totally dark in your room, if it is totally dark, then how many of you agree with me that we won't be able to see the objects around us? If it is dark, we won't be able to see. Raise your hand. Okay, so if you agree with me, likewise, if the surface of this mind is dark, has the nature of darkness, does not have the nature of luminosity, then the object formed will be dark. Whereas the object, when I think about the object, they reflect in my mind, not as dark, but having the luminosity. So this luminosity is, what is this luminosity? This is not the external light, right? This is not the external light. For example, the object in front of us, we can see them because they are illuminated by the light outside, right? The light outside, the source of light that we have, it illuminates the object. But the internal mind, this mind does not have this light, external light, right? So what is that thing? What is that nature of the mind which illuminates the object that are formed on it? So this is known as the luminosity aspect of the mind, right? So the clarity aspect of the mind can be understood in two ways. Number one, that for the images to be formed or the reflection of the image of the objects to be formed on this mind, it should have the clarity aspect. It should be clear. It should not be tainted by the any kind of stains. Number one. Number two, this should have the aspect of luminosity. This should have the aspect of luminosity. Now, when we did this exercise, we all saw that, okay, our mind has this aspect of clarity and has this aspect of luminosity. Number one. Now, another aspect that we learned from the definition, let me repeat it. The definition says an agent that is clear and knowing. Okay, an agent, a mind is an agent that is clear and knowing. Now, clarity part is done. Now, the knowing part. Okay, so now we have given the example of mirror, right? So let's say when we put this flower in front of the mirror, the reflection of the mirror will be, the reflection of the flower will be formed on the mirror, right? So the reflection of the flower will be formed on the mirror, but how many of you agree with me that the mirror doesn't know that this reflection is formed on the surface of the mirror? How many of you agree? Just raise your hand if you say that, yes, the reflection is formed on the surface of the mirror, but the mirror doesn't know that the reflection is formed on my surface, right? So, but unlike the mirror, our mind, when we thought about the flower, not only the flower reflected, not only the reflection of the flower was formed on our mind knows that the image of the flower has been formed on my surface. How many of you agree with me? That how many of you knew that the image of the flower has come to my mind? How many of you knew that? So this is known as knowing aspect of the mind. So while the mirror has clarity aspect, it does not have the knowing aspect. But this mind, this empirical agent known as mind, this has two aspects. Number one, it has the aspect of clarity, means any object it interacts with, the reflection of the object is formed on its surface, because this mind is clear in nature. Number one. Number two, this mind also has the aspect of knowing. Not only the reflection is, not only the image is formed on the surface, the mind knows that the image is formed on my surface, right? So this is known as the knowing aspect of the mind. So now the definition says an agent that is clear and knowing. So now the clarity aspect is clear and the knowing aspect is clear. Now why it is agent, which I explained earlier, that the interaction between the subject and object, whatever we experience is the result of the interaction between subject and object. So subject, we also call it agent, right? Agent interacting with its object. So the agent like mind, which has the aspect of clarity and also has the aspect of knowing. This is the definition of the mind. Okay, so if you say, now we have to be very precise. When we define mind, we have to look for these two aspects. Number one, we have to know that this is subject. Okay, for example, oh, this flower is mind. How many of you say yes? Okay, how many say no, that this flower is not mine? Okay, so from the definition, how can I make it sure that this is not mine? Because it's not an agent, right? This is not a subject. How many of you agree with me? So the definition says that it should be an agent. It should be a subject. Number one. Okay, so this flower is not an agent or subject. So this is not mine. Number one. Number two, for example, mirror. If I give the example of mirror, oh, is it mine? Then you, how many of you will say no, it is not mine? Just raise your hand. Okay, and from the definition, how can you deduce it? Because the definition says that it should be a clear and knowing agent. While the mirror has the aspect of clarity, it does not have the aspect of knowingness. It does not have the potential to know its object, right? The attribute of knowing its object. So the mirror is also not mind. Okay, so therefore we have to see that, okay, all these criteria are fulfilled when we say that something is mind. Now, the empirical reality or the empirical entity which we all experience, sorry. Okay, can you see me now? Okay, sorry. So now we have to be very precise that, okay, what is mind, which has the aspect of clarity? First of all, it should be an agent. It should be a subject, number one. Number two, while being a subject, it should have two aspects. Number one, aspect of clarity. Number two, aspect of knowing its object. So something which fulfills these criteria, this is known as agent, or this is known as subject or mind. Okay, so this is about the definition of mind. Okay, let me again share the PPT. Okay, can you see that on the screen? Can anybody tell me if you can see the slides? Okay, thank you.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, good. So we are done with this part, that what is the nature of the mind and what is the definition of the mind. Okay, so now let me repeat the definition. Mind is an agent that is clear and known. Okay, now next is the classifications of mind. So Buddhist psychology also includes the different kinds of mind. So now this empirical reality or the empirical agent, which is clear in nature and which has the aspect of knowing its object. So what are the types of this mind? What are the different classification of this mind? So few of the classifications I have given on the screen. For example, sevenfold division of mind. Number 2, non-conceptual mind and conceptual mind. Then sense consciousness and mental consciousness, cognitive mind and affective mind, non-mistaken mind and mistaken mind, selective engager and eliminative engager, then mind and mental factors, subtle mind and gross mind, and there are many more. So if somebody is interested, to study this empirical agent known as mind, then they are all being discussed in great detail as a part of the Buddhist psychology course that we do under Nalanda Master's course, and also in Nalanda Diploma course. Okay, so now in the coming session, if you have seen the announcement, we are going to study sevenfold division of mind. So this division of mind is a very comprehensive way of classifying the mind, the cognitive minds. And many of these divisions, many of these classifications, for example, let's say sense consciousness and mental consciousness, then non-mistaken mind and mistaken mind, they all can be explained as a part of the sevenfold division of mind. And then also there is something known as mind and mental factors, which is a huge topic and extremely important for somebody who wants to study the nature of mind for first to deal with and then to have command over one's emotional states. Now, this coming session, we are going to study sevenfold division of mind. Can you hear me? I can see the message that the sound is low. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So now, next session, we are going to go into the detail of sevenfold division of mind. So today, I'll just give you an overview of the second point. What is the second point? It says non-conceptual mind and the conceptual mind. Let me repeat it. Non-conceptual mind and conceptual mind. And then the third point, sense consciousness and mental consciousness, will be explained as a part of sevenfold division of mind. So this we are going to do next class. Okay. So the conceptual mind and non-conceptual mind, this is again an exhaustive division of mind. Exhaustive division of mind meaning any mind, any mental state or any mind that we experience should fall under the category of either conceptual mind or non-conceptual mind. So in that way, this is the exhaustive division of mind. Let me repeat it. Any mind that we have in our continuum or any mind that we experience should fall under the category of either conceptual mind or non-conceptual mind. Okay, so what do you mean by conceptual mind and non-conceptual mind? Okay, so let me give you an example. First, let me give you an example. Okay, let's say again this flower. How many of you saw this flower? Just raise your hand. Okay, look at it very clearly. Look at it for a while. Okay, now this is the flower that I've shown to you. And then how many? Okay, if I say then through this, live streaming, there are complications. But let's say how many of you have your mobile in front of you? Your mobile, not mine. How many of you have your mobile in front of you? Okay, good. Okay, how many of you see this mobile? Your own mobile, right? Now, when you see this mobile, and then I ask you to think about, let's say, think about this flower. Okay, these are the two scenarios. Number one, seeing your own mobile. Number one. Number two is thinking about the flower that I've shown to you. Okay, don't forget the two scenarios. Let me repeat it. Number one, seeing your own mobile, which is in front of you. Number one. Number two, thinking about this flower that I've shown to you. Two things. Okay. Okay, tell me, when you see your mobile, do you see it directly? Right? Do you see it directly? Okay, number one. Number two, just now close your eyes. Let's do this exercise again. Just close your eyes. Okay, I am showing it again to you. Just close your eyes and think about this flower. Think about this flower. Okay. Okay, how many of you could think about the flower that I've shown to you? Just raise your hand. How many of you could think about it? Okay, now anybody, okay, how many of you say that how many of you say that the flower has come to your mind? When you thought about it, flower has come to your mind. Raise your hand. Okay, good. So this means you could think about the flower. Now tell me, the flower has come to your mind or the image of the flower has come to your mind? Tell me, anybody?
Image of the flower.
Shelley, right. So the image of the flower.
The image.
Right. The image of the flower, okay, as we learned from the definition, the image of the flower was formed on the mind, right? So the image of the flower came to your mind. But I didn't ask you to think about the image of the flower, right? What did I ask you? I asked you to think about the flower, right? But then what comes to our mind is image of the flower. How many of you agree with me? Okay.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
now if I ask you that think about the flower again, think about this flower again. Okay, open your eyes. Now tell me, how many of you would say that the flower came to our mind? Okay. Or how many of you still say that it was the image of the flower that came to my mind? The flower is far away. You're in Gangtok, right? So it did not come to my mind, but the image of the flower came to my mind. Okay, so can you see the question I'm asking and the exercise that you're doing? So when I asked you to think about the flower, you cannot think about the flower evading the mental image of the flower. How many of you agree with me? You cannot think about this flower without having the image of the flower, without having the image of the flower formed in your mind, right? If you think about this flower, you have to get to the flower through the image of the flower. Okay, let me repeat it. How many of you agree with me that to think about this flower, I'm saying think, to think about this flower, I have to get to it through the image of the flower, to the mental image of the flower. How many of you agree with me that I can only think about the flower when the mental image of the flower is there, or via mental image of the flower? So the mind, so this mind which gets to its object like flower via mental image of the object, this is known as conceptual mind. So a mind which gets to it. Okay, let me now give you a very simple definition of the conceptual mind. I'll give it slowly. So a mind which gets to its object via mental image. Okay, now because we are in the third session, let me give you the technical terms also. So mental image, this mental image which came to your mind, technically it is known as generic image or meaning generality. Let me repeat it. The mental image of the flower which came to you when you thought about the flower, that mental image, technically it is known as generic image or meaning generality. Generic image or meaning generality. And those who know Tibetan, the word is Gyunchi. Okay, because the English translation may vary, but if you know the Tibetan terminology, you can be sure that, okay, this is talking about the mental image or the generic image. Okay, so mental image. Okay, now let me give you the definition again. So the conceptual mind is a mind which gets to its object via generic image of the object. So any mind, so in other words, all the thinking minds, all the minds which think of their object, they are known as conceptual mind. Conceptual mind. Why? Because to get to their objects, let's say you think about the lunch that you had today. To think about the lunch, how many of you can think about it? You all can think about it, right? The lunch you had, you experience yourself. So if we think about it, we cannot think about that lunch without going through the image of the or the generic image of the lunch. So this mind which gets to its object via generic image of the object known as conceptual mind. So this is also one empirical reality. So now we all, how many of you have thought in your life, or how many of you like to think in your life? Okay, we all, right? We have to think, right? To do many of the things, we have to think properly. So now we know technically that this empirical reality of the mind or thinking mind is known as conceptual mind. Why? Not because the label is given, because this mind gets to its object via generic image of the object. It can never apprehend its primary object without getting to the or without seeing the interacting with the generic image of the object. So this mind, all the thinking minds that I have, they are conceptual in nature. Number one, okay? So all the thinking minds that we have, they are conceptual in nature. Number one. Now the non-conceptual. So now the opposite. Now it becomes easy for us. Non-conceptual mind meaning a mind which gets to its object without having to go or without having to go via generic image of the object. A mind, in other words, a mind which gets to its object directly without having to rely on the generic image of the object. For example, the mobile in front of you. Okay, the mobile in front of you, when your eyes see this mobile, in technical terms, your eye consciousness sees this. So what is this eye consciousness? We are going to learn it next session. So let's say your eyes, when you look at this mobile, you can know this, this mobile, right? You know this mobile, you can see this mobile. So that consciousness known as eye consciousness, seeing the mobile. So this eye consciousness seeing the mobile does not get to its object through the image of the mobile, right? It gets to its object mobile directly without having to rely on the image of the mobile. So this is known as non-conceptual mind. Non-conceptual mind. Okay, so this is also an empirical reality. All the sensory consciousnesses that we have, they are all non-conceptual in nature. Means they get to their object or they apprehend, they see their object, they cognize their object directly without having to go through the generic image of the object. So these are known as, now what are the sensory consciousnesses? This is going to be, this we are going to do next session. Okay. Okay, so this is about the conceptual mind and non-conceptual mind. Okay, I think how much time do we have, Penzilla?
About 20 minutes left.
Okay, 20 minutes left. So now this was the, okay, let me again share the PPT.
Madam, good evening, everybody. Can I ask, ma'am? 20 minutes.
Yes, just
Because
5 minutes.
Okay.
Just 5 minutes, and then I'm finishing, and then we can take questions. Would that be okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So here we go. Okay. Now, can you see that? Anybody?
Yes, we can see the.
Okay, good. Okay, so what we did today is the definition of mind and one of the division or the classification of mind known as conceptual mind and non-conceptual mind. So we just learned the definition in a very simple form, not the technical definition. So if you happen to study Buddhist psychology, you will learn very technical definitions of these minds that I'm sharing with you. Okay, so now the conceptual mind, as you can see on the screen, it says it is of two kinds. The conceptual mind, for example, any mind which gets to its object via generic image, that can be of two kinds. Number one, conceptual mind which accords with the fact. Conceptual mind which accords with the fact. To make it very simple, the valid conceptual minds. The valid conceptual mind. And the second one says conceptual mind which are discordant with the fact, meaning the erroneous or the deceptive conceptual minds. Erroneous or the deceptive conceptual minds. So the valid conceptual mind meaning the object of your mind should exist. The object of your mind should exist. For example, let's say, how many of you agree with me that we can think about, we can think a rope for us, or we can think, let's say, you can think that you have a rope in your room, and then you are so fearful of snakes. So because of that, you can think that the rope in my room is actually snake, right? So sometimes, we do have this mistaken minds, right? Mistaking the rope for a snake, right? So when you think about the rope as a snake, so that is a conceptual mind, right? This is a conceptual mind. It's a thinking mind, but it is not a valid conceptual mind, right? It is a erroneous conceptual mind. So the conceptual mind, it's not necessary that the conceptual mind has to be valid. They can be erroneous or deceptive conceptual mind. For example, the mind which thinks the rope as a snake, number one. And then there are valid conceptual mind. For example, thinking about this flower which exists, right? So you think about this flower, oh, this flower is red in color, this flower is nice, or whatever. So this flower is red in color. So this is a fact, right? This is red in color. So this is known as, this is also a thinking mind, this is also a conceptual mind, but this is a valid conceptual mind. Valid conception. So in other words, in short, what we have to know that the conceptual mind, they can be valid in nature and they can be invalid or erroneous in nature. Okay. Then within the non-conceptual mind, of course, this also applies to the non-conceptual mind. Non-conceptual mind can also be deceptive and can also be valid in nature. Okay. They can be, for example, you can not only think, but you can actually see, because of your fear, you can see something in a mistaken way. So for that, to really gain conviction in that, okay, how non-conceptual minds can be valid and erroneous in nature. For this, we have to go into the study or into the details of something called sensory consciousnesses and mental direct consciousnesses. So they are the further divisions of non-conceptual mind. Sensory consciousnesses, the 5 sensory consciousnesses, and 1 mental direct consciousness that is non-conceptual in nature, and they all can be erroneous or valid in nature. They can be valid, they can be deceptive in nature. Okay, so this is about the divisions of the conceptual mind. And so now the next class, before we start the Q&A, just for your information, the next class is we are going to go into the detail of something known as sevenfold division of mind. So as I told you, this is again very comprehensive way of classifying the minds that we experience, the different kinds of mind that we experience. If we come to learn this sevenfold division of mind, and that too, if we can really identify them in our mental stream, then you can, of course, later, employ the ways and means, or you can, change them for having the happiness and not having suffering. So first thing is, in order to change them, we have to first identify them, right? We have to identify them, and all of them are the empirical realities. So first step is to know what these 7 kinds of mind that we have in our mental continuum, and to identify them, number 2. Number 3, once identified, make them valid in nature, or make them so that they give rise to happiness and do not give rise to suffering. Okay, so this is how the whole study of the psychology is related to the basic aspirations. Okay, I think we can stop here for today, and I would be happy to take questions now. Okay, who was there, who was asking question? Anybody
Yes,
who wants to clarification,
yes.
Please.
I want to ask, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Good evening,
Yes.
everybody, and special the host and madam. And a little bit, I will introduce my little bit. Okay, now 5-10 seconds. And my name is Kinzish. I'm also researching about mind in both in Buddhism science and foreign philosophy in the mind past 10, 12 years. And now my questions come to the because I go to my research and aspect in, and I have some rising of some questions because ma'am told that mind is its agent, right? It is clearing and knowing. So it is an agent. Agent is what is exact what agent? Because in this world we know in the universe to exist in the some specific forms like image form, matter, and space. So if you say agent, it should be something we have to by definition or by clarifying, by looking or by proving, by scientific or anything, but we can mean. So madam, what is your meaning of the agent in these cases?
Okay, thank you, Tenzin Yeshila. Thank you for your question. Okay, so agent here, of course, when we talk about the agent, it can have different connotations, right? Agent, you know, in terms of, for example, in your scientific experiments, also you talk about the agent, action, and there are many things, right? So here, when I said agent, it's nothing but the subject. Subject. So when we started the class, we said that, okay, all the experiences of pain and pleasure, they come into being when your subject, when your mind or yourself interact with the objects, right? Only when you come in contact with something nice, the pleasant experience come to you, right? And when you come in contact with something not nice, the unpleasant experience come to you. So now, what is actually in you that comes in contact with you? So you see that it is my mind which is interacting with the objects. So now, if the objects are there, what interacts with it becomes your subject, right? So the subject and object. So in that context, subject meaning agent. Agent meaning which performs the actions, right? In simple terms, agent means something which performs the action. So now this subject like mind performs the action to interact with the objects. So that is the meaning of agent here. Okay, good. Anybody has any more questions or clarification? Yes, Parulji.
I just remember that when Geshe-la taught us this, he says clear knowing, but because people find it hard to get a grip, he adds the term an agent of clear and knowing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Parulji. That's very helpful. Okay, anybody else wants any? Okay, yes, Nimaji, right? I can see.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hi,
yes.
Hi,
Yes,
Pujala.
Mala, you can ask your question.
I
Hello.
just wanted to have a few words of appreciation. Although we've read these in detail, it was very useful to have this summary. I found it very useful. I had a question when you were explaining about clarity and the luminosity aspect of mind. I was wondering, I was trying to relate, I was trying to establish that for myself. And I was wondering whether the luminosity aspect, how do I prove it to myself? So because I don't have an experience where I have had a mind which has not known luminosity. So I was just trying to know if there is someone who has an experience, say, with someone who's not been able to see from birth. So would their experience of luminosity be different from that of us? So just a query in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Nimaji. This is a wonderful question. In fact, luminosity aspect of the mind, you know. So first of all, we have to, you know, in our own experience, we have to understand what you mean by luminosity aspect of the mind. So not thinking about that, okay, subtle mind, gross mind, do I have the experience of this? Just simply doing this exercise that, okay, just think about an object in front of you. And then how does this object appear to you? Does this object come to you as dark, or this object comes to you as very clear to your mind? So the moment you say clear, so it means there is, for example, the example is like, we all can see the objects around us, right? We are sitting somewhere or we are standing somewhere, we can see the objects around us. So what illuminates this object for us to see is the light source, right? The external light. Had it been the case that there is no light, we will not be able to see this object. Why? Because there is nothing which can illuminate this object. Now, if this is the reason that we see the objects, because a light illuminates it. Now, when we think about the flower comes to our mind not as dark, but very clear in nature. So what is that thing which is illuminating this object formed on my mind? Of course, it is not the external source, right? So when I closed my eyes and thinking about the flower, there is no external source, right? But still the flower comes very clear to my mind. So this is all because the nature of the mind is luminous in nature. So this is the internal luminosity or the nature of the mind. So this much, if we can gain conviction in, number one. Number two, what Nimaji is asking is a very specific scenario where, let's say, somebody who cannot see, or let's say doesn't have the eye consciousness, right? So now for them, do we have the luminosity? Do they have the luminosity of mind or not? When, so now Nimaji is actually asking, I said for something, when I define something, in logic, that we have to learn that definition, meaning an object and its definition. So how can I know that this is the definition? Means the object or the definiendum, let's say, should qualify the definition. Means whatever is the definition, definiendum should be the definition, means should be the definition of that definiendum, and the vice versa. In other words, whatever is the mind should be an agent which is clear and knowing in nature. And what is an agent that is, and whatever is an agent that is clear and knowing should be the mind. Okay, so there should not be any exceptions. Now Nimaji is bringing up the exception. So if there is exception, then this should not be the definition of mind. So this, in fact, this what we study as a part of logic, that okay, when we define something, how can I gain conviction that this is the definition of this object or this definiendum? For this, all these criteria, that there should not be any exception which goes beyond the definition. Okay, so now this question, in fact, so somebody who does not have eye consciousness, and let's say, I'll give you the example. Okay, there are many scenarios. Let's say somebody not having eye consciousness since birth, and somebody having eye consciousness, having lost the eye consciousness after certain years in life. So all these scenarios are different. So let's say where you do not have the eye consciousness, that's a different thing, right? That okay, when you cannot see the object, how can I talk about the whether or not the object appears as dark or as luminous or as clear in nature, right? Number two, I'll give you one example and it should make things a little clearer for us. Let's say when we say that, okay, for example, let's say the darkness, darkness. How many of you have the experience of seeing the darkness? How many of you have the experience of seeing the darkness in your life? That, okay, you enter a room and there is no light and it's all dark. And then how many of you are so sure that I have seen the darkness? That I can be 100% sure that it was dark, right? Now, on the one side, I said that the nature of mind is luminous in nature, right? Luminous in nature. On the other side, I'm saying that, okay, my mind sees the darkness, right? So the darkness comes to your mind, right? How many of you agree with me? Now, how can I know the clarity and the luminous aspect of the mind? So now, the very fact that the darkness, and how does darkness comes to you? As if you cannot see it or you can see it so clearly. The moment you say that I know I saw darkness, it's a clear indication that this mind saw this darkness very clearly. It was not dark, meaning that you're not able to see the image that is formed in your mind or the reflection of the object that has been formed in your mind. But the moment you say that I'm very sure that it was dark in the room, it's a clear indication that the darkness came very clearly to your mind. So this darkness was, the image of the darkness that was formed on your mind was extremely clear and luminous in nature. Luminous in the nature, meaning that that there is a clarity, means it's clear in nature. Clear in the sense that it's not something, what do you mean by dark here? Dark as opposite to luminous here, meaning that you cannot see it, that you cannot experience it, that you cannot cognize it, that you cannot, it appears as something which you cannot see. It's not clear at all. Whereas when darkness comes to your mind, it comes very clearly. And how can I know that it's very clear? I just ask yourself, are you sure that you have seen darkness? Yes, I'm very sure it was all dark. There was not even a ray of light there. So that darkness reflected on your mind very clearly. So the clarity aspect of the mind with respect to darkness also. So this example will help us that, okay, the mind has the clarity and luminous nature. It doesn't mean that all the objects that we see should be luminous should be luminous in nature. Anything, in fact, let's say you see a dirty object or a very unclear object. Is it possible or not that you see a very unclear object and a very dirty object? But now the definition says that clear and knowing agent. So it should see the object clear. It should see the unclear object as very clear. It should see the dirty object as very clearly. Okay, so now if that is fulfilled, and how can I know that my mind knows the unclear nature very clearly? Ask yourself, is it unclear or clear what I'm seeing? You will say, the moment you say it's unclear, it means it reflected on your mind very clearly. So the definition holds true, that the nature of the mind is clear and knowing. Means whatever is reflected on it, it reflects on it very clearly with the luminosity, and not as something which you cannot see or comprehend or apprehend. Okay, so this is the meaning of the luminosity and clarity aspect of the mind. Nimaji, does it help a little?
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. I'll be
Anybody?
reflecting on it more.
Okay, anybody has any more clarifications to ask?
Ma'am, please,
Okay.
can you give me some suggestion of my research and thesis? Actually, madam, I study some like Buddhism's patterns and foreign patterns. Now I'm telling exactly what exactly I got the result of mind. I find like it is internal image. It is mind is just type of image. It is an internal image, and we cannot say it's an agent from my point of view. Okay, ma'am. Then after, please you give me advice, because I and then which will be acting like some like image of any for give very example, simple example, like modern gadgets like phones can take captures of the image and sounds. Anything can be stored in the phone, but without battery, phone is nothing. No, ma'am. Same like in our body is just like machine type. They can take memory, imagine, and it's depend on the also image quality, also depend on the our eyes. Same type in these cases. But when these two appear to see, see the mind, it should be something like a battery type mind, is acting like internal image. So, madam, you said you ask about it for my. Yes, ma'am.
Reflections
Yes,
are
sorry, ma'am.
very,
Yes,
yes,
for
reflections,
ma'am, for my
and of
point of
course
view, ma'am,
related to your
explanation
research,
is, madam,
related,
explanation about the properties of the mind, like this type. So, ma'am,
I
what do you think about, ma'am, my perception? Because I feel mind is just internal image, which cannot be destroyed, no be created. That is why Buddhism says that there is mind can be transformed in next reincarnation. If we say it is agent, cannot be reincarnated,
okay,
because it can destroy, finish. So, ma'am, please.
good, Yeshila. Thank you. In fact, I understand it's not easy to understand each and every element of the definition on the spot. Of course, we have to reflect on it. And as I can see that you have done reflections on this topic. And regarding your research, we can always exchange emails. But particularly about this agent, to make it very simple for you, not going into the details, agent in simple English language, what do you mean by agent? Which performs action, right? If you agree with this meaning of the agent, forget about how agent is defined in neuroscience, how agent is defined in physics, how agent is defined in the research that you're doing. Just understanding the meaning of the agent in a very simple English language. Agent means anything that performs actions, right? So now, if you agree that agent means something that performs action, then the subject, that this mind also performs the action of apprehending its object. right? For example, you are talking to me, you can see your screen, right? So your mind can see the screen. So it is performing the action of seeing the screen. So if you say yes, then by that point, you can say that this mind is agent in nature. Why? Because it performs action. What action? Action of action of apprehending the objects that it comes in contact with. Okay, so this is the simple meaning of agent here. If you find agent word little difficult, because this word can be understood, you know, with different connotation in different streams, then you can use for the time being subject, a subject which is clear and knowing. But don't just delete this word altogether, agent, because it has its own importance here. That agent meaning something that performs an action, and mind being an agent performs the action of apprehending its object, contacting its object, cognizing its object. So that's a very important attribute of the mind. Okay, good. Yes, and first David G, and then I can see Joy Jules.
Yeah, thank you. I have a short question. I'm attending the NDC3, and when Geshe-la was explaining the sevenfold divisions of mind, in the beginning it was direct, valid, perceiver. When you perceive something directly without non-conceptual, and he said that when you see a rope as a snake, that is non-conceptual, direct, mistaken perceiver. And some of us, including me, we try to object to this and say that no, but the snake, the image of the snake is a concept. There is no snake, there is a rope, but the concept comes. A person who has never seen a snake before in his life would not see the rope as a snake. But he insisted, we tried to debate with him, but that wasn't possible, you know. he kind of won over us. But it seemed now, when I listened to you, that you would side with us. You said that the mistaken perceiver, seeing the rope as a snake, is a conceptual perception.
It can be. It can be
Be.
both. Yes, it can be both. Of course, when I said when a mind thinks, the moment I qualify the word think, you know, then it becomes conceptual. A mind which thinks a rope as a snake, then it's conceptual mind. So that is the thing I used. Thinking mind. A mind, let's say your mind is thinking that, okay, the rope in my room, it's snake. So that's a mistaken, that's a erroneous mind. And what kind of erroneous mind? Conceptual or non-conceptual? It's conceptual in nature. Why? Because it's a thinking mind. It's a thinking mind. Okay. So that's what I said. So
Sorry for the interruption.
But can I see the rope as a snake non-conceptually?
okay, the answer is okay. Yes, and I understand why are you saying that no, because to see the rope as snake, you need some concept of the snake coming to your mind. But that concept is coming to your mind because of your earlier experience of the snake, right? Earlier experience of the snake, or earlier contacting with the snake. So now that concept coming to your mind, of course it helps. It helps. In fact, you having this non-conceptual erroneous mind is a result of your previous concepts only. Somebody who has never seen snake will never have this mistaken mind. Do you agree with me, David, or not?
Yes.
Somebody who has never seen snake, in fact, the snake is in front of the person will think that, okay, this is not snake, right? Forget about being afraid of it. The person will not even think that this is snake. Why? Because the concept of snake is missing. So that's how the children, they make mistakes, because the concept is missing. That okay, fire is fire. They don't have the concept of fire being hot, and then they get burnt. So therefore, this concept is very important for one to have the erroneous mind with respect to seeing this rope as snake. But this is the factor which induces the seeing the rope as snake. But it is not that because this helps you, it means this is the conceptual mind. No. For conceptual mind, the criteria is that it should get to its object via meaning generality or generic image. Now, if it is not getting to its object via meaning generality, but directly, then this is non-conceptual mind. So this, if you think about these factors, we'll get some clarity that, okay, yes, the concept is there. Nobody is denying that the concept of snake is helping me, but it does not mean that this makes it conceptual mind. In fact, for the conceptual mind, erroneous conceptual mind, which sees the rope as snake, or which thinks that the rope is snake, for this also you need a concept. David G, do you agree with me? You have to have the concept of snake. So that previous concept of snake helps you to have this erroneous conceptual mind also. Likewise, this previous experience of or the concept of snake that you have in your mind, this helps us to have the erroneous non-conceptual mind as well. So it helps. It does not mean it makes it conceptual in nature. It helps in both the cases.
Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you.
Because of time, we'll take one last question from Joyra. Yeah, Joyla, please ask the question.
Pujala, can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
You know, just as someone is having a lot of trouble with the word agent, I also had a problem with that. I have a great problem with meaning generality. And I've read this in Anne Klein, you know, in that mind, you know, in Buddhism and things like that. And I have never understood what it means. For example, the example I'll use is most of us have one mother, right? Most of us are born by one person. We are not adopted. For decades, we see this mother. The mother passes away. And so I was thinking of my mother when you spoke of meaning generality. What is the relation between memory? Because why would you say it's a conceptual mind if I remember when she was angry, when she was happy, when she was sad, when she was sick, when she died, etc. This is something which I feel a lot, right? Because it's somebody very close to me. Or you could feel that with a child or a spouse. But with my mother, so I want to know, how can I call anything that I remember about her, a memory, a meaning generality?
Okay. Thank you, Georgie.
You know,
Thank you.
what is the relation between memory of a specific moment and a person?
Yes, I can see the nuance in your question. In fact, memory, you know, memory. Okay, so now because we are going into nuances, and I'm sorry if it's getting a little difficult for the beginners. Don't worry. As long as you can, you know, remember the definition of the mind and the twofold division of mind, conceptual and non-conceptual, it's fine. And then these questions are very precious. That okay, what is the relation between the memory and the meaning generality? Okay, so now for Georgie, meaning generality, if you find it difficult because the wording is such, meaning generality, so of course, you know, the synonym is generic image or the mental image that is formed on our mind, right? Now the second question is memory and the meaning generality. So memory is a mind, right? Memory is a mind. We'll all agree that memory means your own mind, right? Now, and I understand you can say memory of the object, then you're talking about the object and not really the mind. But when you say memory means you're talking about a mind which memorizes the object. Okay, so there is a memory as a subject which has the memorized object as its content. Okay, these are the two things. Now memory, since Joyaji is from NMC NDC, I can make it a little technical, that all memories are always conceptual in nature, are always conceptual minds. All memories are always conceptual mind. And this memory, you know, because it's a conceptual mind, so when it gets to its object, it gets to it via generic image of the object. For example, let's say you say, when I think about my mother, you know, when I think about my mother, so that's what we say, that okay, I'm recalling mother. Okay, I'm recalling my mother. So now what happens is, when you think about your mother or you recall your mother, you are you know, you are recollecting the experience with your mother. So what happens? How do you have this memory? Because the image of the mother is formed, right? You get to the memory, or you have this memory because there is a mind which gets to the mother through the generic image, or let's say image of the mother formed. So memory is always a conceptual mind, and this conceptual mind, meaning it gets to the object or the content of the memory via image of the content or image of the object. So this we have to know. So now if you know, then memory, if you take it as a subject, then it's a conceptual mind. And then how this conceptual mind or memory gets to its object, it's known as via generic image or via meaning generality. So that is meaning generality. It's not the object, it's not the subject. Meaning generality is never the subject. It's the object. It's a object which your conceptual mind has to use in order to get to its primary object. Okay, I hope it's not too technical for others. Okay, Yes, Tamila.
Okay.
And okay, Tamila's question. Okay.
So like
Last question. Then okay,
anyone?
now Tenzila. Yes, Tenzila.
Okay, so like with this, we have come to the end of today's program. And on behalf of Tibet House, I would like to thank Dr. Pujala for a very effective and insightful teachings on today's topic. And I also would like to thank all the participants for joining today's session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Let me say a few words, Tenzila. So
Yeah, sure.
I would like to thank Tenzin Legmola for moderating this session. So, and also I am seeing many more hands coming up. So don't worry, we have next session to go into the details of the psychology and all the classification of mind. So you please note down your questions and ask them in the next session. And also you can write to me if you have pressing questions before the next session, right? So I really thank Venerable Geshe-la again, Tibet House, and all the participants here for their kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pujala.
Thank you, ma'am.